The lonely widow had passed dozens of crowded tables that afternoon, yet it was the poorest one in town that made her stop. Clara Whitmore stood beneath the wooden awning of a small eating house in Red Creek, Colorado, watching a tired father share one plate of beans with his young daughter. The summer of 1876 had dried the streets until every passing wagon lifted a cloud of pale dust into the air. Heat pressed down on the town, making the roofs shine and the horses lower their heads in exhaustion. Clara wore a fine burgundy dress with black buttons and a narrow hat trimmed with lace. Her clothes showed that she belonged to a world far removed from the rough miners, ranch hands, and settlers filling the street. She owned property in Denver, shares in 2 railroad companies, and more money than she could spend in a lifetime. Still, she had never felt poorer than she did at that moment. At a small table near the edge of the porch sat a broad-shouldered man named Caleb Mercer. His brown shirt was faded from years of work, and the sleeves had been repaired more than once. His dark hair was touched with dust, and a short beard covered his tired face. His hands were rough and marked with old burns. Across from him sat his 8-year-old daughter, Molly. There was only one plate between them. Caleb used his spoon to gather a small bite of beans for himself. Then he pushed the largest part toward Molly. When the girl reached for the last piece of cornbread, Caleb broke it carefully in 2. He gave her the soft center and kept the dry edge. Clara felt something tighten inside her chest. She remembered her own father doing the same thing many years earlier when their family had been poor. He had often claimed he was not hungry so she and her younger brother could eat. Later, when fortune came, there were servants, silver plates, and tables covered with food. Yet nothing had ever tasted as warm as those small meals shared in love. Caleb noticed Clara standing nearby, but he did not stare at her expensive dress or jewelry. He simply gave her a polite nod before turning back to his daughter. Molly saw her next. The child's eyes were large and brown, and her faded yellow dress had been patched at both elbows. She looked at Clara, then at the empty chair beside the table. Clara stepped closer. The boards creaked softly under her boots. She placed one gloved hand on the back of the chair. "Can I sit with you?" she asked. Caleb looked up. His gray-blue eyes held caution, but no anger. He studied her face as though he were trying to understand why a wealthy stranger would choose their table when several cleaner ones were empty. "It belongs to the eating house," he said, "but I reckon no one will stop you." Molly leaned toward him and whispered, "Pa, is she lost?" Clara smiled for the first time that day. "Maybe I am," she said. Caleb pulled the chair out slightly with his boot. "Then you are welcome to rest until you find your way." Clara sat down. She did not care that dust covered the table or that a dark stain marked one corner. For the first time in weeks, she did not feel watched for her money, her family name, or the black dress she had worn since her husband's death. Molly pushed the plate toward the center. "We can share," she said. Clara looked at the few beans left on it. "You are very kind. Pa says food tastes better when nobody eats alone." Caleb lowered his eyes, almost embarrassed by the child's words. "We do not have much," he said, "but there is no sense guarding an empty plate." Clara removed her gloves and rested her hands on the table. "My name is Clara." She did not give her last name. Most people in Colorado knew the name Whitmore. Her late husband, Henry Whitmore, had made a fortune moving lumber and railroad supplies across the territory. Since his death 2 years earlier, businessmen had surrounded Clara like hungry wolves. Some wanted her money, others wanted her land. A few wanted to marry her so they could control both. Caleb did not ask what family she belonged to. "I am Caleb Mercer," he said. "This is Molly." Molly gave Clara a small smile. The eating house owner came outside carrying a pitcher of water. He looked surprised to see Clara at the table, but she quietly ordered 3 full meals. Caleb immediately shook his head. "That is not necessary." "I know," Clara replied. "I am hungry and I would rather not eat alone." Caleb watched her carefully. "You do not have to pretend for our sake." "I am not pretending." The owner returned with stew, fresh bread, and slices of apple. Molly's eyes widened at the sight of the food, but she waited until Caleb nodded before touching anything. Clara noticed. The girl had been taught manners, even when hunger made patience difficult. For several minutes they ate in silence. The noise of Red Creek continued around them. A wagon rolled past carrying sacks of grain. Men argued outside the saloon. Somewhere near the edge of town, a hammer rang against metal. Clara looked at Caleb's scarred hands. "What work do you do?" "Whatever keeps us fed," he said. "I repair wagons, shoe horses, mend plows, and work at the sawmill when they need extra men." "You sound like a blacksmith." "I was one once." His answer held a closed door behind it. Clara did not push. Molly took a bite of apple and smiled with such joy that Clara had to look away. The child reminded her of the daughter she had once dreamed of having. After 10 years of marriage, she and Henry had never been blessed with children. When he died, the great house in Denver became so quiet that every room seemed to echo. Caleb studied her face. "You have the look of someone carrying a heavy memory," he said. Clara's hand became still around her spoon. "You can see that. A person who has known grief can usually recognize it in someone else." His words touched something she had kept hidden beneath silk, manners, and polite smiles. Clara looked toward the street. "My father once lost nearly everything," she said. "Our home, our land, his business. We were saved by someone we never met." Caleb did not speak, but something changed in his eyes. Clara continued. "Years ago, after a warehouse fire in Missouri, my father owed more money than he could pay. A stranger bought a ruined piece of land from him for far more than it was worth. That payment kept our family from losing our home." "Did you ever find the stranger?" "No." Clara's voice softened. "I have searched for years." Caleb looked down at the table. Maybe he never wanted to be found. Why would anyone hide after doing something so generous? Because kindness does not always need an audience. Clara felt a strange chill despite the heat. Before she could ask what he meant, a shadow fell across the table. A tall man in a pale gray suit stood on the porch. His polished boots were almost untouched by dust, and a silver chain crossed his expensive vest. It was Warren Pike, a railroad investor from Denver. He had followed Clara to Red Creek, hoping to convince her to sell him a large section of land her husband had left behind. "Mrs. Whitmore," Warren said loudly, "I have been searching everywhere for you." Caleb's eyes moved toward Clara. Her identity was no longer hidden. Warren looked at the poor man and child sitting beside her. Disgust twisted his face. "What are you doing here?" "I am eating." "With them." Molly lowered her spoon. Caleb placed one protective hand behind his daughter's chair. Warren gave a cold laugh. "You should be more careful, Clara. Men like this see a wealthy widow and begin dreaming of easy fortune." Caleb's jaw tightened, but he remained seated. "I did not ask the lady for anything." Warren ignored him. "You cannot wander around sitting with every beggar in town." Clara slowly stood. Her voice was calm, but her eyes had turned hard. "You will apologize?" Warren stared at her. "For what?" "For insulting a good father in front of his child." The porch became quiet. Even the eating house owner stopped moving. Warren's face darkened. "You know nothing about him." "I know he gave his daughter the best part of his meal while keeping almost nothing for himself. That already tells me more about his character than years of knowing you has revealed about yours." Warren stepped closer. "You are allowing grief to cloud your judgment. And you are allowing greed to reveal yours." He looked around, aware that people were watching. "You will regret embarrassing me." "No, Mr. Pike, you will regret threatening me." Warren's smile disappeared. Clara moved closer and lowered her voice. "If you speak to Caleb or Molly this way again, every railroad office between Denver and St. Louis will learn how you conduct business. I will make certain no honest investor trusts you with a single dollar." Warren's face turned pale. He tipped his hat stiffly and walked away. His boots struck the boardwalk with angry force. When he disappeared into the street, Clara sat again. But the warmth at the table was gone. Caleb looked down at his hands. Men like that do not forget humiliation. I am not afraid of him. You should be. He stood and helped Molly from her chair. You were kind to us, Mrs. Whitmore. I will remember that. Clara felt a sudden fear that she would never see him again. Caleb, wait. He paused. She wanted to ask where he lived. She wanted to explain that Warren's words meant nothing. She wanted to know why Caleb's face had changed when she mentioned the stranger who saved her father. But Caleb only touched the brim of his worn hat. Thank you for the meal. Then he took Molly's hand and walked into the dusty street. Clara watched them disappear between the wagons. A few minutes later, she reached into her small leather bag for a handkerchief. As she pulled it out, an old folded paper slipped onto the porch. She bent and picked it up. It was the land receipt her father had kept after the fire. Clara carried it everywhere, hoping one day she would find the person whose payment had saved them. The paper was yellow and weak with age. At the bottom were 2 faded initials. CM. Clara had studied those letters hundreds of times. But beneath them was another mark she had never truly noticed. A tiny drawing of a blacksmith's anvil. Her breath caught. Caleb Mercer had said he was once a blacksmith. His initials were CM. Clara looked toward the street, but he was already gone. The poor father who could barely afford 1 plate of beans might be the stranger who had once saved her entire family. Clara spent the night inside the finest room at the Red Creek Hotel, but she did not sleep. The bed was soft, the curtains were thick, and a silver tray of untouched food sat beside the window. None of it gave her peace. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Caleb breaking the cornbread and giving Molly the soft center. Then she saw the faded initials on the old receipt. CM. The tiny anvil mark beneath them seemed impossible to ignore. By sunrise, Clara had made her decision. She dressed in a simple brown traveling dress and left her expensive hat behind. She hired a small carriage and began asking questions around town. Most people knew Caleb Mercer. The stable owner said Caleb repaired wagon wheels for families who could not pay. A rancher said Caleb had once worked through an entire freezing night to save 3 horses trapped inside a collapsed barn. The schoolteacher said Molly was one of the brightest children in Red Creek, though she often missed lessons because her father needed help at home. No one knew much about Caleb's past. He came here about 5 years ago, the stable owner said. Had the girl with him and almost nothing else, built a little workshop near Willow Bend, never causes trouble, never asks for charity. Was he always poor? Clara asked. The man shook his head. Hard to say. He carries himself like someone who used to own more than the clothes on his back. Clara followed the road beyond town. The land became rougher as the houses disappeared. Dry grass covered the low hills, and cottonwood trees leaned over a narrow stream. After nearly an hour, she heard the clear ring of iron. Clang, clang, clang. She found Caleb's workshop beside the water. It was a small wooden building with a patched roof and 1 wide door. A lean horse stood beneath a shade tree. Near the entrance, Molly sat on an overturned bucket with an old book resting on her knees. The girl looked up. Her face brightened. Miss Clara. Caleb stopped his hammer in midair. He stood beside a glowing piece of metal, his sleeves rolled above his elbows. Sweat darkened his shirt and sparks faded around his boots. He slowly lowered the hammer. You came a long way from town. I needed to speak with you. His eyes moved toward the folded paper in her hand. He seemed to understand before she said anything. Clara stepped inside the workshop. Heat rolled over her, thick with the smell of coal, hot iron, and smoke. She held out the receipt. Do you recognize this? Caleb looked at the paper but did not take it. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. Molly watched from the doorway. At last, Caleb set his hammer on the anvil. I have not seen that paper in a long time. Clara felt her heartbeat quicken. So it was you. Caleb wiped his hands on a cloth. I was younger then. You bought my father's land. Yes, you paid nearly 3 times what it was worth. Caleb looked toward the open door. The morning light touched the side of his tired face. Your father once helped me when I was a boy. Clara moved closer. How? Caleb leaned against the work table. My mother died when I was 9. My father left before that. I spent months sleeping near freight yards and behind stores in Independence, Missouri. Molly had stopped reading. Caleb's voice remained steady, but Clara could hear the pain beneath it. One winter morning, I tried to steal bread from a bakery. The owner caught me and dragged me into the street. He wanted the sheriff. Clara already knew what he was going to say. My father was there. Caleb nodded. He paid for the bread. Then he bought me a hot meal and a coat. Before he left, he told me that being hungry did not make me bad. He said the world could be cruel, but I did not have to become cruel with it. Clara's eyes filled with tears. That sounds like him. I never forgot his face. Caleb picked up a pair of iron tongs and placed them aside, as though keeping his hands busy made the memory easier. Years later, I worked in mining camps in Nevada. I found a small silver claim, not enough to make me famous, but enough to start over. And then you heard about the fire. Yes. Clara looked at the old receipt. You could have bought better land. I did not need better land. You could have kept the money. I had money because someone once gave a hungry boy a chance. When I heard that same man was about to lose everything, keeping it would have felt wrong. Clara struggled to speak. My father searched for you. I know. You knew. Caleb nodded. He placed notices in newspapers. I saw one, but I did not want payment or praise. Why not? Because your father had already paid me years before. Clara looked around the poor workshop. The roof leaked near one corner. Several tools were worn almost smooth. Molly's shoes had been repaired with strips of leather. What happened to the rest of your money? Caleb's face changed. He glanced at his daughter. I married a woman named Rebecca. Molly lowered her eyes. She was kind and strong, Caleb continued. She made every place feel like home. After Molly was born, Rebecca became sick. At first, the doctor said she only needed rest. Then she began coughing blood. His voice became quieter. I sold the land I had bought, then the house, then almost every tool I owned. I brought doctors from Kansas City and Denver. I bought medicine from anyone who promised it might help. Clara felt the grief in every word. She died when Molly was 3. Molly closed her book. Caleb looked at her with tenderness. After that, I put what remained into a bank. I wanted Molly to have a future. The bank failed 2 years later. By the time we came to Red Creek, I had 1 horse, 3 tools, and enough money for a week of food. Clara looked down at the receipt again. You lost everything after helping my family. No. Caleb's answer was firm. I lost money. I did not lose everything. His eyes moved to Molly. My daughter is everything. Clara wiped a tear from her cheek. Do you regret it? Helping your father? Yes. Never. But you were eating 1 plate of beans yesterday. And Molly did not go hungry. You should not have to live like this. Caleb's jaw tightened. I am not ashamed of honest work. I did not mean that. I know what wealthy people see when they look at this place. They see failure. Clara stepped closer. I see the man who saved my father. Caleb looked at her. The sound of the stream drifted through the open doorway. Clara held the receipt against her chest. My whole life was built on what you did. My father rebuilt his business because of you. I was educated because of you. I met my husband because our family survived that fire. Everything I have began with your kindness. Caleb shook his head. It began with your father buying bread for a hungry boy. Then let me continue what he started. His expression hardened. I do not want your money. I am not offering charity. What are you offering? Clara looked around the workshop. A partnership. Caleb gave a quiet, humorless laugh. You own railroad shares. I repair broken wagon wheels. And half the wagons in this county depend on you. That does not make us partners. It could. Clara placed the receipt on the work table. I want to build a proper smithy in town. Strong walls, good tools, space for wagon repair, and a second room where Molly can study while you work. Caleb stepped away. No. Caleb. No. Molly looked between them. Clara kept her voice calm. You helped my family without asking permission. That was different. How? Your father needed help. So do you. His eyes flashed. I can care for my daughter. I know you can. I watched you give her the best part of your meal. I have never doubted your love for her. Then do not treat me like a man who cannot stand on his own. Clara took a breath. I am asking you to stand beside me. The anger in his face softened slightly. Before he could answer, the sound of horses reached them. 3 riders appeared on the road. Warren Pike rode in front. He dismounted near the workshop with 2 large men behind him. Clara's body went cold. Warren smiled as he approached. I warned you, Mrs. Whitmore. Caleb moved in front of Molly. What do you want? Warren pulled a folded document from inside his coat. This land belongs to the Pike Railroad Company. Caleb stared at him. That is a lie. I purchased the debt attached to this property yesterday. There is no debt. Warren opened the paper. There is now. Clara stepped forward. You cannot create ownership with a forged document. Warren's smile widened. You should be careful with accusations. I know your methods. And I know your weakness. His eyes moved from Clara to Caleb. You are willing to risk your name for this man. Clara stood straighter. Yes. Warren's smile disappeared. Then he will lose everything because of you. Caleb's hands closed into fists. You will leave. One of Warren's men stepped forward, but Warren raised a hand. No need for violence today. He looked around the workshop. You have 3 days to leave this property. After that, my men will remove you. Molly pressed against Caleb's side. This is our home, she whispered. Warren looked at the child without pity. Not anymore. Caleb took 1 step forward. Clara caught his arm. Warren climbed back onto his horse. As he turned away, he looked at Clara. You embarrassed me in town. Now I will teach you what kindness costs. The riders disappeared down the road. Silence returned to the workshop. Molly began to cry quietly. Caleb knelt and pulled her into his arms. No one is taking you from your home, he promised. But Clara saw the fear in his eyes. She picked up the document Warren had dropped near the door. At the bottom was a seal from the county land office. The seal looked real. That made the danger worse. Clara studied the signature. Then she noticed a name she recognized. The county clerk who had approved the transfer was a man who owed Warren Pike thousands of dollars. Clara folded the paper. This is not only about the land, she said. Caleb stood. What do you mean? Warren is trying to fright me into selling my railroad property. He thinks hurting you will make me surrender. Then stay away from us. Clara stared at him. What? If he is using us against you, leave Red Creek. I will not. Molly has already lost her mother. I will not let her lose her home because a wealthy man wants revenge. Clara stepped closer. You did not bring this danger to us, Caleb said, but your world did. Clara felt the words like a wound. My world also has lawyers, judges, and enough power to stop him. And what will it cost? Whatever it must. Caleb shook his head. I do not want another person destroying their life to save mine. Clara's eyes filled again. You saved my father's life. That does not mean you owe me yours. She looked at Molly, then at the small workshop and the fading fire. "This is not debt, Caleb." "Then what is it?" Clara wanted to answer. She wanted to tell him that she had felt more alive at his poor table than inside all the grand rooms she owned. She wanted to tell him that Molly's smile had awakened a part of her heart she thought had died. She wanted to tell him that his strength, grief, and kindness had followed her into every quiet moment. But she was afraid of saying too much. "It is a choice," she said, "and I choose not to leave." Caleb stared at her for a long moment. Then a sharp crack sounded above them. One of the roof beams split. A heavy iron hook fell toward Molly. Clara moved before anyone else. She rushed forward and pushed the child aside. The hook struck Clara's shoulder and knocked her to the floor. Molly screamed. Caleb dropped beside Clara. Blood darkened the fabric near her collar. "Clara." His voice shook. She opened her eyes. "I am all right." "You are bleeding." Caleb lifted her carefully into his arms. For the first time, his strong hands trembled. Molly stood beside them crying. Clara looked toward the broken beam. The wood had not cracked from age. A clean cut ran through most of it. Someone had weakened the beam before Warren arrived. Caleb saw it too. His face turned pale with rage. Warren Pike had not come only to threaten them. He had already tried to make the workshop fall. Caleb carried Clara into the small room behind the workshop and laid her carefully on the narrow bed. Molly ran beside him, crying and holding Clara's hand. The iron hook had cut through the fabric near Clara's shoulder, but the wound was not deep. Caleb cleaned it with warm water and wrapped it with a strip of clean cloth. His movements were gentle, though anger burned in his eyes. "You could have been killed," he said. "So could Molly. You did not even stop to think." Clara looked toward the frightened child. There was no time. Molly climbed onto the edge of the bed and wrapped her arms around Clara. "You saved me." Clara held her close. Caleb turned away for a moment. His shoulders rose and fell with a deep breath. He had already lost one woman he loved. The sight of Clara bleeding had awakened a fear he had tried to bury for years. When he faced her again, his voice was low. "You should return to Denver." Clara stared at him. "After what happened, you still want me to leave." "I want you alive. And I want you and Molly safe. This is my fight." "No, Caleb," Warren made it mine the moment he threatened a child. Molly looked up at her father. "Pa, Miss Clara is family." The room became silent. Clara felt those words reach deeper than the wound in her shoulder. Caleb knelt in front of Molly. "She has her own home. But she is always alone there." Caleb looked at Clara. Molly continued before either adult could answer. "She sits with us, she eats with us. She saved me, that sounds like family." Clara's eyes filled with tears. Caleb lowered his head. He had spent years protecting Molly from hunger, cold, and disappointment. He had believed love meant carrying every burden alone. But now he understood that shutting Clara out would not protect anyone. It would only leave all three of them lonely. He stood slowly. "We have 3 days," he said. Clara nodded. "Then we will use them well." That afternoon, Caleb repaired the damaged beam while Clara sent messages from the town telegraph office. She contacted her attorney in Denver, a railroad investigator in St. Louis, and the state land office. She also sent one message to a man named Judge Nathan Cole. Judge Cole had been a close friend of her late husband. He was known for refusing bribes, even when powerful men tried to destroy him. The next morning, Warren's forged claim was posted outside the county office. People gathered to read it. Some townsmen advised Caleb to leave quietly. They knew Warren controlled several businesses and had friends in the sheriff's office. Others offered wagons and horses to help Caleb move his belongings. Caleb thanked them, but he refused to leave. Clara stood beside him outside the workshop. "You are certain?" she asked. "This is Molly's home." And if we lose? He looked at her. Then we lose standing together. For the first time, Clara heard trust in his voice. That evening, Warren returned with 4 men. He stopped his horse near the workshop and smiled. I expected you to be gone. You expected wrong, Caleb said. Warren looked at Clara's bandaged shoulder. I heard there was an accident. Clara's eyes hardened. It was not an accident. Be careful what you claim. I sent the broken beam to an investigator. The saw marks will speak clearly. Warren's smile weakened. You think money can frighten me? No, Clara said, but the truth might. Warren dismounted. You have until tomorrow morning. Caleb stepped between him and the workshop. You will not come near my daughter again. Warren laughed. You are a poor laborer standing in the way of progress. I am a father standing in the way of a coward. The men behind Warren moved forward. Then a wagon appeared on the road. Judge Nathan Cole sat in front beside Clara's attorney. Behind them rode 2 federal marshals and the state land inspector. Warren's face changed. The wagon stopped near the workshop. Judge Cole climbed down, holding a leather case. Mr. Pike, he said, you have caused a great deal of trouble. Warren tried to recover his confidence. This is private property. No, the land inspector replied. It belongs to Caleb Mercer. The transfer document is false. He opened a folder. The county clerk confessed this morning. He admitted that you paid him to create the debt and change the land records. The marshals stepped closer. Warren looked toward his men, but they slowly moved away from him. Judge Cole continued. The clerk also admitted that you ordered the workshop damaged. One of your hired men has already confessed to cutting the roof beam. Molly watched from the doorway. Caleb kept one hand near her shoulder. Warren pointed at Clara. This woman arranged all of this because she wants my railroad holdings. Clara shook her head. I wanted you to leave an innocent family alone. You have ruined me. No, Caleb said, you did that yourself. One marshal took Warren's arm. For the first time, the proud businessman looked afraid. As they led him toward the wagon, he turned back. You think this makes you equals? Clara stepped beside Caleb. No, character made us equals long before today. Warren was taken away. His men scattered before sunset. The false claim was removed from the county office, and Caleb's ownership was officially protected. That night, the people of Red Creek gathered outside the workshop. They brought bread, meat, nails, wood, and tools. The rancher whose horses Caleb had once saved brought a new anvil. The schoolteacher brought books for Molly. The stable owner offered lumber for a stronger roof. Caleb stood in silence, overwhelmed by the kindness surrounding him. You helped all of them, Clara said. Now they are helping you. I never expected anything back. Kindness rarely returns from the same direction. Over the following weeks, the workshop was rebuilt. Clara did not simply pay for it. She worked beside the townspeople. She carried small boards, organized supplies, and prepared meals. Her fine dresses were replaced by simple cotton ones. Dust covered her boots, and she stopped caring. The new building had strong stone walls, a large forge, and space for wagon repairs. Beside it stood a small classroom with shelves for books. Molly entered the room on the first day and stared at the clean wooden desk. Is this really for me? For you and every child who needs a place to learn, Clara said. Molly hugged her. Caleb watched from the doorway. Later that evening, after Molly had fallen asleep, he and Clara sat beside the stream. The sky above Red Creek was painted orange and purple. Caleb held the old receipt in his hands. I used to think helping your father was the most important thing I ever did. It saved my family. But now I think it only led me here. Clara looked at him. To this workshop. To you. Her breath caught. Caleb turned the paper slowly between his fingers. I have been afraid to care for someone again. After Rebecca died, I told myself Molly was all I needed. She is enough. She is, but love does not become smaller when another person enters your heart. Clara looked toward the stream. I was afraid, too. My home in Denver has 20 rooms, but every night it feels empty. Caleb reached for her hand. You asked to sit with us because you did not want to eat alone. Yes. I should have understood then. Understood what? That you were not searching for a chair. Clara's eyes filled with tears. What was I searching for? A home. Caleb lowered himself onto one knee. There was no expensive ring in his hand. Instead, he held a small iron circle he had shaped at the forge. A tiny flower was carved into its surface. I cannot offer you grand rooms or servants, he said. I can offer honest work, simple meals, a child who already loves you, and a place beside me for as long as I live. Clara covered her mouth with one hand. Clara Whitmore, will you marry me? She smiled through her tears. Yes. They were married beneath the cottonwood trees beside the stream. The whole town attended. Molly wore a new yellow dress and carried wildflowers. She stood between Clara and Caleb during the ceremony, holding both their hands. Afterward, they shared stew, bread, and apple slices at long wooden tables outside the workshop. Clara could have ordered the finest meal in Colorado, but she chose the same simple food they had shared on the day they met. Years passed. The Mercer workshop became the strongest business in Red Creek. Caleb trained young men who needed honest work. Clara built a school and a small clinic. No child in town was turned away because their family could not pay. Molly grew into a kind and intelligent woman. She became Red Creek's first full-time teacher. Clara kept the old receipt framed above the fireplace. It reminded them that one loaf of bread had saved a hungry boy, that one generous land purchase had saved a family, and that one empty chair had brought 3 lonely people together. Every summer evening, Caleb, Clara, and Molly ate on the wide porch of their home. There was always an extra chair at the table. When travelers passed through Red Creek hungry or alone, Clara would smile and ask the same question that had changed her life. Can I sit with you? And Caleb would pull out the chair beside him. Because Clara had once believed she was only asking for company. In truth, she had been asking whether there was still a place in the world where her heart could belong. Beside a single father and the daughter he loved more than himself, she finally found the answer.